Tonight's panel here with me in New York is co-host of The Five, Kimberly Guilfoyle, and Fox News contributor and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Voice, Lisa Booth.
I was looking over here.
I know.
Kimberly knows what she's doing.
we're fine. We'll just figure it out. It's fun. It's a new venue for this show. It's very exciting to see you here in New York. But
great to be here.
This is a big story. This budget. It's got a lot of people worked up. But Kimberly, whichever way you look at it, I mean, I've got to ask you, this is a big defeat for the president, isn't it?
Well, and you could sense the president's frustration and that he was sort of toying with the idea of not putting it through because it isn't what he promised the people. It's not what, he ran on. It's not the core principles about the populist movement that he was really gaining such momentum going through the campaign and then coming into office. He's the guy that wanted to come in and drain the swamp. And I'll tell you what, Steve, Congress is the swamp. I mean, it really is. I think it's so disappointing that they do such a disservice to the American people because there's so much excess in terms of spending. They're not looking to try to make it more limited government. I couldn't agree more with you that you really have to take it down, take the power reins away from the federal government, away from Congress, and take it down to its core basic principles and go down to the communities, to the state level, to the municipalities to try to get tighter reign over it. Otherwise, you have congressmen going in and putting forward these special extras in all of this in terms of the funding to try to do some favors for their friends. And they're doing favors for their friends, but they're doing a disservice to the American people. I mean, what is going on here? It's the exact opposite of what we were hoping for and what we were promised. But I think the president agrees with us, is the thing.
Right. Well, OK, fine. That's nice to hear. But what's he going to do about it? Lisa, the thing that interests me about this is that it's actually really kind of scrambled some of the politics. And I was really struck by a tweet that I saw today, actually, from one of our fans on the show who said, there is, can't wait for tonight's show. Very excited about the two of you joining us. Please, no President Trump bashing. He's all we have right now. I thought there was something really kind of plaintive about that. You did see Ann Coulter bashing the president. You saw Rush Limbaugh doing this. A lot of people saying, hang on a second, this is what he was all about, and he's kind of flunked this big test. On the other hand, his supporters saying that's all we've got left is the hope that he might do something. What hope is there now that things will really change?
Well, so having worked on Capitol Hill and for members of Congress, I think the swamp is the process of Congress and the nuances of Congress. I think that's why you see President Trump talking about wanting to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. This is something that has immensely frustrated him because Republicans don't have a supermajority in the Senate. It does take 60 votes to get the omnibus bill passed. And I think Republicans chose probably the path of least resistance and maybe not fighting harder for some of these priorities, like more funding for the border wall, getting rid of sanctuary cities, not funding Planned Parenthood, these things that they've been, quite frankly, promising Republican voters for years now. But it does also come down to the fact that Republicans don't have that supermajority. And I really do think that's why we've seen President Trump express frustration over and over again with the process of Capitol Hill, with the fact that you need 60 on some of these things to get them passed. And I think we're just going to continue to see this immense frustration from him on that very issue.
Yeah, well, they have to do a better job because it's just gluttonous, right? I mean, people are tired of it. It's like you were put in office to do something. There's going to be consequences when the midterm elections come up. And if you're somebody that is part of the problem, then you have to be removed. It's that simple.
But do you think that's going to come back and hit the president, too?
Well, of course, guess what? The president is the one that's actually suffering some of the consequences of this because he's the one that everybody put in to make sure that this wasn't going to happen. And instead, it's like, okay, wait a second, business as usual in Washington, D.C. Super swampy, very disappointing, and too much excess. And that's not like tightening the budget, trimming the fat out, and actually doing the hard work. He's done a good job in terms of cutting back on regulations and things like that.
I think that's an important point to emphasize. And we were talking about this earlier. I think that there's no doubt that dynamic boost to the economy from the deregulation, in that sense you've got a pro-business administration, has really delivered results. Lisa, I want to come back to your point about the Senate and all the rules.
Sure.
There are some who would argue, well, that's the whole point. That's what's in the Constitution, to slow down the impulses of the people who elect a president, to have this deliberative system that actually doesn't allow the results of a presidential election to automatically be turned into what the Congress does.
Well, if you're in the minority, you love the filibuster. Right. If you're in the majority, you hate the filibuster, because if you're in the minority, it allows you to potentially slow down a process or to not give victories or to not allow legislation that you dislike to be passed. If you are in the majority, you hate it because it allows the minority to help prevent some of the things that you want to get done and some of those policy objectives. But politically speaking, to Kimberly's point, I do think it has a demoralizing effect on voters as well, because here they are, they're going out to the polls and they're saying, you're going to fight for me. You're going to get these things done you're promising me. We're going to get rid of Planned Parenthood funding. We're going to get rid of Sanctuary City funding. We are going to build the wall. We're going to do all these awesome things. I'm so pumped up. I'm excited. And then it doesn't happen. And
but not just it doesn't happen. I mean, this bill doesn't just not build the wall. Right. It actually bans the wall. It explicitly says you can't do it. It's amazing.
And heading into 2018, that's not necessarily a great thing for Republicans either.
No, it's not. And that's actually something that's like a big focal point for the president. People can understand that when you talk about the wall, like everybody's ears, perk up. You want to, who's going to pay for it? Well, apparently, Mexico's not paying for it. It's going to be this big. And I mean, it's disappointing, right? Because it's one of the big vocal points of his campaign, of his presidency, and people want to see the results. So now you've got a lot of excess spending. You don't have the wall getting taken care of, so they're frustrated. So he's going to have to do something.
Well, that's why. But this is. Yes, I agree with that. But I think the other thing is that you've got the reality that the people in there, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, they love this power that they have, and they just want more and more of it. And honestly, that's why I said in the piece earlier, I don't think anything's going to change until you actually elect people to Congress who truly believe in giving away their power. I mean, I don't know how that's going to ever happen.
I think people choose
a couple years down the line.
Well, I think they choose the path of least resistance. For instance, they're supposed to head out to recess for a couple weeks. Campaign elections are starting to pick up. As I mentioned, the 2018 midterm elections, they're worried about the re-election as well. And so they don't want to be in Congress dealing with this or a potential government shutdown. And so I think you have both sides. One, Democrats having been essentially beaten, at least from the PR department, on the last government shutdown, and the Republicans being in charge, not wanting to be responsible for a government shutdown. So they chose a path of least resistance, was just making this muddled compromise of this ridiculous $1.3 trillion price tag that really doesn't fight for any of their priorities.
I think we've got to leave it there, but I think it's going to come back and bite him on the bum, as we sometimes say in England. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for on that.